I'm Mike Hebert, owner of Cantex Roofing and Construction. Every day is game day, and we'll get it right when it comes to your roofing, construction, windows, and mirrors. Call Cantex Roofing and Construction today. Together, we are one serving you.
The podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3, presented by Cantex Roofing and Construction.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. Happy Friday. It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Dr. Mike Gustafson. I'm Aaron Dickens. We're joining you today from the First United Bank studio with you until 5:30. Today, of course, the Texas Tech Red Raiders will play their regular season finale later on tonight in Austin against Texas. Red Raiders already bowl eligible, so they will play another game beyond this. The regular season will close tonight in Austin. We also have Lady Raider basketball at 8, taking on Rutgers. We have that coverage at again at 8 o'clock on 107.7 Yes FM. And the Red Raider basketball team getting started at 4 o'clock against Michigan. We'll have that coverage on 100.7 The Score. There's college football going on right now. We'll have college football on throughout the afternoon today leading up to the Tech game. So it's a busy Friday. Gus, how you going?
I am doing good. Fun little busy Black Friday. Not something we would normally say, but you throw this basketball game on, this tournament basketball game on top of a Friday night Black Friday football game, and suddenly the Red Raider fandom is we're kind of dialed in. Yeah. And this is a brand name brand name basketball opponent too, playing Michigan. I mean that's fun.
Red Raiders getting a win against Northern Iowa yesterday. A come from behind affair. We're down 15 points at one point,
and 10 minutes left, wasn't it?
Scrapped back to win that game. I think that's a good character building, experience building game. I don't know that Northern Iowa is going to just reap a whole lot of rewards for you net score wise in March. Hopefully it does.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think proving to yourself as a team that you can do that, I think, is going to be a valuable experience to draw on once conference play starts.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Those type things will help they just sort of sit in the back of your mind as an athlete. Like, hey, we've been here before, we've done this before, and so I think it's something they can draw from. And they were cool down the stretch. I mean, and got after it. And McCaslin talked about them upping the defensive intensity in a way that that's always going to need to be there. There will probably always throughout the season be lulls and hot stretches and whatnot, but to be able to dial into some defense and have it change the game and to pick up the pace offensively, hit some shots, do all those things, just a nice win. And boy, getting this Michigan game would be, and this is for like 5th place in that thing, so I don't act like we're playing them for the history of the universe or whatever, but it's be a nice game to draw from, and something to that one might have a little net juice to it. This Michigan game.
Texas Tech is a 2 or 2.5 point favorite, depending on where you look, against the Wolverines. That's not as large of a spread as I was maybe expecting. So Vegas would indicate that you're right there in this. Yeah. So we'll see what they do, and we'll overlap with them in terms of game action for about an hour. So if for some reason you're listening to us from 4:30 to 5:30, we'll keep you abreast of the goings on there with the Red Raider basketball team. College football last night, Egg Bowl, Ole Miss beating Mississippi State. It was ugly. It was not very entertaining. It was kind of sloppy. It was kind of a college football representation of how I felt on Thursday night. Just, I don't want to move, I just want to be very still.
Ate too much.
Ate way too much. But
and there's no surprise by that result either. Ole Miss, heavily favored. Mississippi State fired their head coach a couple weeks ago. So,
and some news coming out from that game at the end: Will Rogers, the quarterback there that we saw at the Liberty Bowl a couple of years ago, planning to transfer and play somewhere else for his final year of eligibility. Expected to be one of many kind of high-profile quarterbacks available in the portal. So we're kind of curious to see where all they end up.
And he probably went there all in on the Mike Leach experience, and was probably recruited with those words that Sawyer Robertson talked about. Lubbock product that went there and played for a couple of years before moving to Baylor, which were, hey, you want to come here and lead the nation in passing, and so obviously Rogers has moved on. Sawyer Robertson moved on last year after Coach Leach passed. So. You talk about a revamp there for Mississippi State.
Did you watch any of that game?
I did not.
I have not watched any Mississippi State football until last night. I know this is going to be disappointing to a lot of folks. But they looked abysmal on offense, and I don't know what their injury situation is like, right? Or, who they've lost or who, whatever. But I do know Will Rogers. I know that he was playing. And they looked terrible outside of at the end of the first half when they ran a 2-minute offense, which, a lot of spread concepts, right? A lot of quick passes. And suddenly Will Rogers went from looking very mid to looking pretty good.
Looking comfortable.
And I'm sitting here going, why weren't, I realize it's not what you would want to do. It's not what you would, ideally run if it's your program, Zach Arnett. But when you have this roster and clearly you needed to win pretty quickly, and you didn't, and so now you got bleep canned. Why wouldn't you adapt to your player strengths like that instead of trying to make Will Rogers into a pro-style passer? So sometimes football is not as complicated as some of these coaches make it out to be.
Yeah, that's it's a great question, especially, and I would think that those type of adjustments would be easy to make within the context of the game. Like, hey, we came out. A and B weren't working, but C clicked right there before half. Let's just come out and go no huddle and see what happens here early second half. Just to, like you said, it felt like our energy picked up. Our quarterback seemed comfortable. Maybe you at your core, of course, we're talking about interim all over the place there, aren't comfortable with that pace and know what it does to a defense and this and that and blah, blah, blah. But if nothing is happening and it kind of buzzes for a minute there, you might go, hey, we could at least slip into that every once in a while. And that's not something that we need 3 weeks to prepare for that. Like, no, you probably work on that every Tuesday, right? I mean, 2-minute offense and that type of stuff. So let's just get into this thing, call this thing with pace and see what happens. But, I would sure feel like the Mississippi State thing is going to get worse before it gets better.
Some chatter that they are closing in on their final target. John Summerall, the Troy head coach, former SEC assistant. He's a defensive-minded coach. He's getting some buzz. And then Jeff Lebby, apparently the offensive coordinator of this Oklahoma offense that's put up 60-plus on TCU and counting. Now, he reportedly interviewed with Mississippi State, I think yesterday, and the tie there is the current AD at Mississippi State, who did not hire Zach Arnett and therefore felt no loyalty toward him, came from Oklahoma.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, something Sermon, I think, is his name. Yeah, so TCU is going to maybe score here. 69-38 is the current score in Norman with under 3 minutes to go. Yes, nice. TCU, really was dead at the half. They were down 42-16. They've made it a bit of a game, but Oklahoma's outscored them 17-0 in the fourth quarter to really put it away. And so now, assuming that this score holds, Gus, TCU will join Baylor and Houston as staying home for the holidays. No postseason.
Yeah, that's and there's, I think Murphy just tweeted that we've got 19 teams, assuming this result holds, down to 19 teams because Nebraska got beat earlier. Just as you and I were going on the air, that got finalized. 19 teams for 14 bowl spots.
How about that?
Yeah. And we've come up short in years past, and that's those years that they've created some exceptions for some 5 and 7 teams and whatnot. So
TCU did just score a touchdown. I think they're going to go for 2 here. More Tech Talk next.
The podcast that finishes your workday in a very Red Raider way. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3, presented by Cantex Roofing and Construction.
Hey, it's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Gus. I'm Aaron. We're joining you today until 5:30. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments on the Yates Flooring Center chat line at Double T 97.3.com. You can also access that through the Double T 97.3 mobile app presented by Happy State Bank. We're joining you today from the First United Bank studio. Oklahoma now up 69-45
nice
against TCU. They will probably be able to kneel it out here very shortly, probably right now.
With that first down,
unless TCU wants to burn timeouts for some stupid reason.
Yeah. OU's probably got the 3s in right now, but still.
What TCU can't just run it back, right? Like, if you're a TCU fan, you're not going to be very happy if they just kind of stand pat with their staff and just bring everybody back.
Yeah. And I wondered about that, what their feeling is on Briles versus their D coordinator, and they brought that D coordinator from
it's Joe
Tulsa,
Gillespie, right?
Yeah. I think, Gillespie. That's it. I thought you said Plefka at first, and I knew you didn't say Plefka.
Did you know that he moved? Like, he was at I think a D2 school called Post.
John
Plefka, coaching women's basketball,
like CW Post up in New York.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he recently, I think earlier this year, not recently, but like 6 months ago, took the head job at D2 Auburn University at Montgomery.
Really?
How about that? So he got poached.
Mm-hmm.
They hired him away from Post, which I thought was clearly he's doing well.
Yeah.
At the D2 level.
Also still in women's basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be darned. Of course, we're talking about John Plefka, who attempted baseball for a moment at Tech, but obviously basketball player under Coach Knight and Bob Knight era. Yeah, Gillespie, I don't know. I mean, he was there last year for the success but on the other hand, this is very much a second-year defense and not going well. First-year offensive coordinator Kendall Briles, of course, son of Art, he is in his first year at TCU, and he dealt with a backup quarterback for a good portion of the season. So I guess if they just were looking around the room for needing some skins, Gillespie might be held accountable in a way, a little more so than Briles.
What's funny about this, or interesting, at least I think it's interesting, and when you're working on a Friday after Thanksgiving, you can kind of take some liberties. Like, as magical as last season was for TCU, as wildly as they overachieved, and as successful as it was, right? Period, full stop. It was a massive success, one of the best seasons in their program's history, full stop. Reached heights that they had not really reached ever, at least in the modern era. It wasn't some dominant run. We know this. This is not news to anybody. We lived it, right? Tech went down to Fort Worth last year, and they were in that game. As flawed as they were in that game. But TCU won a bunch of games like that.
Yeah.
They were 6-1 in one-score games last year. And when you play that many one-score games, whether you're the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, or the head coach, I don't know that you gain just a whole lot of equity, because they're, at least from a fan perspective, because this as well as I do, Gus. Oh, this one wasn't good enough. right? Should have beat them by more.
Sure.
Got lucky to escape from that one. Why didn't you hold this team to this many points? Or, why did it take this last second field goal to beat a pretty middling Baylor team, right? And so when you follow that up with a season where you're 0-4 in one score games, like TC was this year, I think that anger just kind of continues to build. And so for a team that's less than a year removed from playing for a national championship, I just don't think that from a fan base perspective, there's a lot of equity built up.
Yeah, I agree. And the common refrain we're hearing now is that he did all that last year with Patterson's guys, and so it's like some of it's being taken away from Sonny in that respect. And but what this is right here, when you watch the season end on the day after Thanksgiving, that becomes a long off season.
And you can also, I think that's a great way to put it. Take it away, right? What does last year look like if they don't go to Max Duggan when they do?
Yeah.
Right? That's probably the most fluky part about the entire season, right? That Chandler Morris gets hurt when he did, and they put in Max Duggan when they did.
They returned to Max Duggan after, 3 years prior of him as starter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated to see what they do. Because I think Sonny's a good coach. I'm not just like super threatened by him from a Texas Tech perspective. But I think he's got less support than you would think from a fan base perspective after playing for a national championship.
I agree, and because there's no sort of for a fan that's even watching it casually, they can't draw a line and say, oh, it's on an uptick, not as quick of an uptick as we would have liked, which is what a Texas Tech fan might be able to say about this season versus last, but still, in a broader sense, it's an uptick from where we've been for a long time. But for them, they had this magical season, and now here, and I think I'll be curious to see if what sort of a portal, if they have some high profile portal exits. And the reason why I say that, AD, is if they went there the first year, and even if you were sitting on the bench, that was like magical, not unless you're just buried in the fifth string and you've been passed by 3 freshmen, then you need to go. But how many of those dudes I'll give this another year and are now enjoying a 5-7 season, and this just it's not the place they want to be. It feels like the
Major
stage.
Everhart, maybe that'd be great.
I agree.
Come on down.
Feels like there. I'll take that skill. Yeah, and of course you're talking about an Amarillo kid there. Mm-hmm. How many of those kids don't see themselves in the way that they saw themselves 12 months ago, or fortunately for them, really just about 10 months ago, because they played considerably late into the season. That's what I'm saying. This is going to feel like an off season that's just dragging as opposed to going into mid-January.
10 months ago, you're strutting around thinking that we're going to run the new Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to be one of the handful 2 flag bearers in the new Big 12. We're going to recruit at a great level. Sonny Dykes is going to portal us all kinds of great players. We've got these 2 hotshot, highly paid assistant coaches. This is our league, and now you're not even going to go to a bowl game, and you just got basically a 70 burger put on you in Norman, Oklahoma. More Tech Talk next.
The podcast put together with Red Raider fans in mind. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3, presented by Cantex Roofing and Construction.
Hey there, how you going? It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com. Gus, I'm Aaron. We're joining you today until 5:30 here from the First United Bank studio. Of course, Texas Tech will take on Texas tonight. That coverage starts at 5:30, kickoff at 6:30. We'll have it for you, of course, here on Double T 97.3. And then is there a Coors Light postgame show for this? Yeah, okay. It's just on the board, but there will be a Coors Light postgame show after the game tonight. Some scores have gone final from today's games. Ohio coming back to beat Akron to finish 9-3. 25-14 was the final. That was an impressive result there from the Bobcats. Pretty good season for them. It includes a win over Iowa State that looks better and better every week. I don't quite know where they will end up bowling-wise. They're not going to be going to the MAC championship game. Miami of Ohio is 6-1. They still play this weekend, but they own head-to-head over Ohio, so their result against Ball State tomorrow was kind of irrelevant. Toledo, class of the MAC, finishes off an 11-1 season. They go perfect 8-0 in the Mid-American Conference, beating Central Michigan 32-17, denying the Chippewas bowl eligibility hopes. They finish 5-7. Memphis beat Temple 45-21. The Tigers close out the regular season 9-3. A pretty, I would say, empty 9-3, Gus, because their losses, Missouri, Tulane, and SMU. They really have not beat anyone of note.
Beat the teams they were better than and lost to the teams they weren't as good as.
Bethune-Cookman, Arkansas State, Navy, Boise State, UAB, North Texas, South Florida, Charlotte, and Temple. And heck, a lot of these wins, Navy by 4 points, Boise State by 3 points. They fired their coach, by the way, the Broncos did. 3 points at North Texas, 6 points at Charlotte. So, yeah, I mean, I think 9-3 is better than Memphis has been in a while. And so it's a major step in the right direction. They were 7-6 last year, 6-6 the year before. COVID year, they were 8-3. But I don't know that there's really kind of a win that you feel great about there if you're Memphis. Maybe they have a big bowl game. Who knows? Miami beat Boston College 45-20. Both of those teams finished 3-5 at the ACC. Both teams going to a bowl game of minimal import. Miami 7-5, Boston College 6-6, and then Iowa beating Nebraska 13-10. Iowa finishes 10-2. Nebraska 5-7. How are you feeling if you're a Nebraska fan about year one under Matt Rule? Without knowing like how recruiting is going or all that stuff.
I don't know. It'd be hard to. It'd probably be hard to consider them trash, but at the same time, it's hard to be overwhelmed by it. Pretty meh season. Not that 6 or 6 or 7 or 5 doesn't, flips that in a considerable way, but it again that becomes a long bowl season. It becomes a long month of December. As everyone else, all these 6-6 teams are playing it out, and you're not. And they had wasn't this a year for a lot of turnovers for them? I think that's right. I think they turned it over a bunch, and that may be anecdotal. I thought I read that somewhere.
Like they gave away the ball a lot.
Yeah, it feels like that.
They were. This doesn't account for today's games or this week's games, but they entered this week of games ranked dead last in the FBS, 133 out of 133.
There you go.
Having turned the ball over 28 times, they are, or at least they were, minus 15 in turnovers entering this week. Do you realize, Gus, and I'm sure that you do, from 1962 until 2016, all right, 1962 to 2016, the Nebraska Cornhuskers missed a bowl game just 4 times.
And what's amazing about that is the early part of that, 1962 part of that.
Yeah, there wasn't
there was about 7 bowl games.
GalleryFurniture.com bowl.
No.
Because 2 of those years early on, they were 6-4. They had a winning record, but just didn't go to a bowl game. 67 and 68.
There you go. And that was back. There just wasn't enough inventory for that. I mean, we didn't have that many bowls to pick from. And And so they did a ton of winning through that Bob Devaney and Dr. Tom era.
1962 to 2016, they missed the bowl game 4 times. They have not made a bowl game since 2016.
Ooh, man.
Now, maybe they'll get, looped in if there aren't enough eligible teams. I don't know how that works, if their APR is high enough or whatever, but still.
And there was a ton of eyeballs on them in week 2 when they were the second team to face Coach Prime. And it was Coach Prime's first home game, right?
That's right.
Because they went to TCU and won, Colorado, and then came home to play that Colorado team, and it was a tight game, as I recall, into the halftime or whatever. But and again, at that time, we were thinking things not a lot different. You remained true to the to tapping the brakes on the Colorado season. But again, when you think about a matchup and the impact of it there in week 2 or week 3 or whatever that was, it kind of, you look back on that game and go, ooh.
And they got smoked.
4-8 versus 5-7. Yeah.
36-14 was the final. Nebraska lost their last 4 games in a row. They were at one point 5-3 going into a matchup against a coachless Michigan State team in East Lansing. And they lost that game by 3 points. They lost to Maryland the following week by 3 points. By a touchdown in Madison to Wisconsin, 24-17, and then they lost today by a field goal.
Oof. So the pain of that is the pain of not making a bowl has that aspect of it you and I talk about. 5-7 is painful, but it was 5-3 at one point, and so that because they're at that point in the season they're going, hey, we can still go 8-4 or what, and so 5-7 becomes awful, especially when you sprinkle in the loss to the interim coach Michigan State deal that's in chaos, and then today. Now that's a pretty successful. It's a 10-2 Iowa team, which is it's this odd thing. I talked about it off the air, but the sort of punchline that is the Iowa team, and every week they play these. They were another 29-point under over
like 27 or something,
and 13-10 the final today.
The under hit,
and offensive coordinator, coach's son, gonna get fired. Oh yeah, and they're 10-2. It's amazing. It is amazing how productive that team is, and hanging W's and doing all that they're doing, and they in an era in which the game is as wide open as ever. It's they are as content as anybody to set up their defense for success and play things conservatively. Their games really are the old Big Ten stereotype. And, they're played like the games of when I was a kid. Everything's very careful and measured, and we're just making sure we don't turn it over. We want to punt it, pin you deep, and play defense.
Yeah, it's just Sooner and Lubbock are, for instance, this shocker on that Iowa-Nebraska score. Yeah, I mean, no kidding.
Well, hope you had the under Sooner.
Then TCU also finished off its season losing 69-45 to Oklahoma. Be curious to kind of see what kind of staff movement takes place there in Fort Worth this offseason. What do you make of the win yesterday for Grant McCaslin and his team?
I was excited for him. Again, contextual. I don't know that you jump up and down over a win over Northern Illinois per se, but when you put some context to it, that the first half yesterday was as bad as maybe the second half the day before against Villanova, and to gather themselves with about 10 minutes left in that game and just get a little spark of success, find a way to play defense, shut things down that way, hit some shots and get back in the game, and then play a nip and tuck game for the last 5 minutes and win. Of course, they win it with the shot almost literally at the buzzer. I think 0.8 seconds left. A little runner by Pop Isaac. But what was interesting to me about that game, and a lot of, there's a lot that's, interesting at this point in the season. But, you know, who was on the floor at the end of that game through a chunk of it was Kerwin Walton. You know, and Kerwin, like, didn't play in one of the early games. And so much of his time this year has been a little bit like last year. 3 minutes here or there, go spell somebody, see if we can get him an open look. He drains a three, and then get him off the floor, you know, like, which is weird. And, I mean, he played the bulk of the stretch, down the stretch yesterday, which tells me that, and he hit a shot or two, maybe. I think it was just maybe 3 points for him on the day. But he was on the floor late when they found their rhythm defensively. And I was just intrigued by that. And I don't think Coach McCaslin addressed it in his media, but, you know, it's the kind of thing that maybe a broader question, if he does a media availability back here in Lubbock on Monday or something, that I hope somebody asks, like, hey, what'd you see from Kerwin? Because in the past, I don't know that he's ever finished out a game that was hanging in the balance like that in a Texas Tech uniform. And so, and again, I don't want to treat it like it's some game changer, but most of the time he's off the floor by then. And it felt like he got into a flow and, you know, got some rhythm and some confidence, and you never know what would happen. I mean, you think about what a highly ranked recruit he was. If he could get his feet under him, it's akin to, I mean, and he hadn't had as much success as Damari Burnett, but it's that same kind of thing. Like, what happens when this dude turns loose? Which, by the way, we're going to face Damari Burnett this afternoon.
It was the most he's played in a game, minute-wise, since logging 22 minutes against Oklahoma State in Stillwater last February. He had 3 points in that game. How about that?
Interesting.
More Tech Talk next.
The podcast that finishes your workday in a very Red Raider way. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3, presented by Cantex Roofing and Construction.
Hey there, how you going? It's Tech Talk on Double T 97.3 and Double T 97.3.com with Gus. I'm Aaron. Joining you today until 5:30. We'll have coverage of the Red Raider football team coming up at that time. Kickoff at 6:30 from Austin, Texas Tech and Texas for the last time as conference foes, probably ever, although ever is a long time. Red Raiders are a hefty underdog here, Gus. 14.5 points is the most recent line that I've seen, although I can check to make sure it's still that. What has to go right today for Texas Tech to get a win? And everything is, while true, not an okay answer for sports radio purposes.
I would imagine that controlling the big shot plays is probably going to be a big deal. Just doesn't feel like that's a
from Texas.
Yeah. Our defense controlling their offense and those type plays going to be a big deal. It's hard to imagine this game. If you're talking about this from the Texas Tech perspective, and I think you are, what would it take for Tech to be successful? It's hard to imagine this team, our team, winning a high-flying shootout and over. You know, we're hypothetically, you know, a game played in the 80s total points. You know, Tech winning a 42-38 game would surprise me. I'd take it. Don't get me wrong. It just feels like our pathway to victory would need to be in the 28-24 range. Hope I'm wrong about that. I'll settle for anything. Don't get me wrong, but you understand what I'm saying.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's because you don't want to get into some sort of name your score type thing. And I say that we're due, and that due thing, that notion of due, and you know, there's none of that in sports really, because it's not a function of luck. I mean, there is luck involved in sports, don't get me wrong, but it's not like, well, Murphy's Law says we're going to go score 40 at some point. No. If you don't have the weapons, you're not going to go score 40. You know, that said, there's some guys who have been better performers in their career than they have been recently, probably in the receiver room. You know, that maybe one of those dudes or a couple of those dudes can go off in a way and us get some shock plays that can allow us to play this game with some offense and some some giddy up and some point total, but it would seem like to me this is going to be a game we need to be playing in the mid-20s.
Yeah, Tech has not scored more than 24 points in 4 of their last 5 games, right? 21 points in a loss to K-State at home, 14 points in Provo. Did score 35 against TCU here.
Yep.
16 points on the road in a win in Lawrence, and then 24 points in a win against UCF.
And you know what? We're a team, and this is no shock here, but we're a team that has run the ball to with great success. Certainly, great success behind an individual, and it's allowed for us to play with that sort of game pace that lets a defense work, and it is akin to what we were just talking about, Iowa State's offensive success. We're suddenly playing at a pace that allows our defense to work. That's scary, going down there and playing against a team with the weapons that they have, but you never know. Yes, as you've seen, you and I talked about this earlier. The TCU game felt like a blowout at halftime. TCU played their way back in. They ended up getting smoked by 20 plus, whatever it was. But
TCU and Oklahoma.
Yeah, TCU and OU today. Sorry, yes, OU beat TCU earlier today. But your phrase the other day was that they've played with their food at different points along the way, and Texas has, and piddled around 2 weeks in a row against K-State and somebody, games that felt like they were over with. Like, all right, I'm turning that game off and driving up to campus for the Tech game, and be sitting there in my seat and figuring out that wait, that game went to overtime. That ended up being a 1-score game. What? And having to go back and hunt out a recap as opposed to just that was some 31-14 game with whatever 10 minutes left in the game. I can forget about it, and it ends up being a banger of a game. But so they're capable of it. Texas is, but I would imagine that place will be charged up, and just the I would assume that they've done all the bulletin board stuff and they're geeked up to play a team that they were probably embarrassed to come here and lose last year. Quinn Ewers didn't get to play in that game, and there's a lot of reason. Xavier Worthy got hurt first quarter of that game here. So there's probably some unfinished business for a bunch of those dudes. And maybe most importantly, if they're just worried about their sideline, they're going, hey, boys, win this game right here, and we're playing next week in Arlington. Win that game there, you're playing in the Final Four. You got a shot at you got a shot at the big kahuna there with 2 more wins or 3 more wins. And, they're probably that dangerous, I would say. And of course, they have maybe not the ultimate resume game, but they have one of the peak resume builders in 2023, which is a win in Tuscaloosa.
It's surprising, as much as Tech has emphasized the run game, right? Especially since Tyler Shuck's injury, as critical as Taj Brooks has been to your success. You're third to last in the Big 12 in time of possession.
That is fascinating.
Which is very surprising. And not that I was expecting you to be at the top, right? Because there's still a lot of tempo, but still I would have thought a bit better than third to last. But this in the chat line from Gary, well, a low-scoring, grinded-out game might help the good guys.
Yep, that's what I would think.
Somebody says this Tech has to score more points than Texas. That's how you win. All right, well, let me write that down. Somebody else says, after a great showing from the Goin Band in New York yesterday, it's hard to focus on Tech football today. Go Raiders, come back in one piece.
I did enjoy all that. That was very cool. Not only the Today Show stuff on Wednesday, which I guess since our last show, I went home and watched the stuff I had recorded and got to see all that. And that was tremendous coverage in terms of we weren't just running up and down the street in the background. Like it was you
didn't have to pause like the precise moment to see the
right.
Band. There they are.
Right. They're waving Raider Red into the studio, and they marched through the studio. I mean, it ended up being really, really cool. And it was several different points, Hoda and Jenna and the whole deal. But then yesterday, CBS with but CBS was probably on the band longer than NBC. And I texted this to Chris Level. I gave him some homework, which I would never do. And I don't bother Level very much, but did you see Kevin, Entertainment Tonight guy, who does the CBS band coverage, saying, yeah, my nephew, and he did air quotes around it, Drew Steffi, is a freshman basketball player at Texas Tech. I'm really excited for him. Like, as the Tech band coverage was concluding, I've actually got it. But I texted that to Chris Level and said, hey, you're he's the one doing interviews and pregame and postgame and stuff. You'll have to get us some homework on that. So
Kevin Frazier?
There you go, Kevin Frazier. I started to say Kevin Warren, and I knew it wasn't the Chicago Bears president and former commissioner of the Big Ten that's doing parade coverage there. Yeah, Kevin Frazier's the Entertainment Weekly or whatever the show he is, Entertainment Tonight or whatever. Yeah. It's like, what's his connection to, again, air quote, nephew, and his air quotes, my nephew, Drew Steffi's a freshman basketball player at Texas Tech, wishing him well. Like, very cool. But anyway, between all of that and then the basketball game yesterday, which was an exciting win, yeah, I'm with you. It's been a fun little couple of days here, and the best way to cap that will be with a win tonight.
Somebody has this in the chat line. One guess, who is the next Aggies coach? If I had to put my own money on it, like $20, I'd say Jed Fish.
The name I was trying to think of earlier hit me after we went to break was Gary Kubiak. Mm-hmm. But there was times where he was an NFL offensive coordinator or head coach, and the Aggies were seeking him out, and there was a lot of folks pining for him to come back to college. And yeah, that Jed Fish thing's interesting. The Ryan Day thing would be interesting. You would think that the shine on Ryan Day would really be off. I shouldn't say really be off, but he would have some damaged goods to him here in 24 hours if they lose again to Michigan. Be what, after beating them 7 years in a row, 6-7 years in a row, they would have lost 3 times in a row, all under Ryan Day. Isn't that right? Like, he didn't need to lose that game again in a way that might affect his ability to, like I said, he might have sort of a damaged goods aspect to him. You made a great point about him the other day too. Like, what's he, what does he represent? What has he done at Ohio State that would make the A&M situation feel better? I mean, you talk about a situation where if they were to go get Ryan Day from Ohio State, the amount of money what they're just trying to get out from with the Jimbo Fisher deal they would be right back into that fire.
How much time left do we have in this segment? 3 minutes? Okay, I have time for this.
Get it.
Ryan Day would be the dumbest hire that A&M could possibly make. It would be the definition of going for initial pop versus substance down the line, because there would be no doubt if A&M ended up hiring Ryan Day, whether they poached him directly or waited for Ohio State to fire him or encourage him to look elsewhere after a loss to Michigan tomorrow, assuming that happens, it would be like the dog catching the trash truck. Like, you caught it, now what?
Right.
I butchered that saying, but you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like, the guy has spent one season coaching south of the Mason-Dixon line, and that was at Florida in 2005 as a GA. Okay, he played at New Hampshire. He was born in New Hampshire. He coached at Boston College. He coached at Temple. He's been at Ohio State since 2017. Couple of stints in the NFL, also not south of the Mason-Dixon. You've got Philadelphia and San Francisco. Like, what relationship does Ryan Day have with the Texas High School Coaches Association? True. Right? Like, how well known is he around those halls in those high schools? Does he know any of the 7-on-7 organizers or any of those teams around the state? No, and no. Like, the guy is Lincoln Riley 2.0, born on third base, thinks he hit a triple, right? Yeah. And plus he dyes his beard, which is creepy as hell.
Yeah, it would be a glaring lack of fit, I would think. Interesting. You
More
make a
Tech
great
Talk
point.
next.
It's every Red Raiders' favorite podcast. This is the Tech Talk Podcast from Double T 97.3, presented by Cantex Roofing and Construction.
Update from the state of Arkansas, where Missouri is just absolutely kicking the absolute hell out of Arkansas. 34-0 is the score, which is not like the worst that we've ever seen. Arkansas currently has 65 yards of offense. They have 4 first downs. They are 0 for 6 on third downs. They have almost as many turnovers, 3, as first downs, 4. They have run the ball 15 times for 43 yards. They've had the ball for just 11 minutes. It is, I mean, somebody opened up a can.
Yeah. That's, yeah, it really does. Puts the AD and the brass that have, that have stuck their neck out a week or two in advance to say, hey, we're behind this, we're behind the Sam Pittman regime. He'll be back next year. And then you get smoked at home. I mean, like the embarrassment factor there, just the volume on that amp just goes, and you just crank it up because a couple things happen. You can hear the post-game call-in show, those guys quit. And that is the thing nobody once said about their program. And, that's a mess there.
If you are an Arkansas season ticket holder this year, you have not seen them beat a Power 5 opponent. They did beat FIU last week, so good for you. They beat Western Carolina and Kent State at the beginning of the season. They have losses at home to BYU, to A&M, to Mississippi State, and to Auburn. And now they're getting the crap kicked out of them by Missouri. And let's rewind, right? They lost at home to a BYU team that will not be going bowling this year, right? That struggled in their first year in the Big 12.
That seemed like a big game when it happened.
Sure. They lost at home to A&M by 12 points. A program that is firing their head coach, right, has fired him. And is probably going to finish 7-5 this season. They lost at home 7-3 to a Mississippi State team that fired their coach, right, and is not going bowling this year. And they lost at home to Auburn 48-10 to a first-year coach at Hugh Freeze, right? And now Missouri, which is good, is objectively a good team. They're probably going to play in a New Year's Six Bowl. Is just, it's like NFL versus high school.
Yeah, ugly.
I mean, God, if you're an Arkansas fan, what hope do you have? Like, if you're an Arkansas fan, why are you watching this team in 2024?
Right, and and just ginning up excitement for the season will be really difficult because it'll all sound and feel empty. I doubt the recruiting is just blazing along.
Next year, they have home games against LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas. They play at Auburn, at Mississippi State, at Missouri. I don't know what their then they also play at Oklahoma State.
Oh.
That's tough.
Yeah, that is.
Matthew says this: why the crap are we switching out the Oregon game for Wazoo next year? So I haven't seen any kind of tech report on that. Maybe that's been out there in the 3 hours that we've been doing this show. We've only seen the John Canzano report. To be fair, I think we both feel like he's fairly plugged in up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the motivation is on the tech side of things. I can't speak for that. I can guess. I can understand why I would maybe want to do that. But I don't know what their motivation would be.
Yeah, I would think there's something in it for tech along the way. I mean, there's something to be valued there, and that you're not going on the road to play what I assume would be a top 10 team. Now, that represents a tremendous challenge. You certainly don't back away from it if it's what's on the schedule, but the opportunity to swap that for another, if you will, Power 5 adjacent program. So in one sense, it represents a perhaps somewhat easier path to a victory, but it's going to be, there will be less eyeballs on that game. Perhaps infinitely less, because you and I can't even sit here and dream of who would broadcast. Not to say that it's not worthy of a broadcast. So I'm saying, like, you and I don't know who the obvious partner is. Is the Pac-12 network still a thing next year? For example, and then just instead of playing in front of 70,000 screaming Autzons, you're playing in front of 32,000 or whatever. And will their situation be a little less excited? I don't know, but. Yeah, I mean, if you start thinking about what's it going to take for Texas Tech to be in the hunt for the conference championship next year and be one of those 12 teams, not losing at Oregon would be a good way to start.
Based on what we think that we know about your football team next year, right? Losing a lot of seniors at a lot of spots, retooling your offensive line, replacing Taj Brooks, probably a lot of new faces in the receiving corps.
And it may be a more talented group.
Yeah. And who knows, like, if there are coordinator changes because they get hired away or whatever. Like, who knows? But based on that, I would much rather that team play having a more obtainable non-conference game than getting your tail kicked at Oregon. Because call me a coward, call me a chicken, I don't care.
I gotcha.
I want the win more than I want the experience.
That's why if it said that we were pushing Oregon back 2 or 3 years, I would probably go, okay, I like the sound of that. And it doesn't really address that. But if it did say that, I would feel like, you know what, I would like to think that we in 2026 will be more capable of going to
2025.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Be more capable of going to Eugene and pulling the big upset than in the next year, than in September. What we know about the next year's schedule, for folks that may not know this, we open with Abilene Christian here. There's, at this point, a trip to Eugene, Oregon, and then a home game against North Texas.
Shelley says this: you're not a coward. You punched that kid in 7th grade. Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate that. Somebody asks this: is there a delay in the basketball game? Yes. The previous game, Memphis and Villanova, ran long. The previous tip time at 5 has been delayed. The last I heard, it was delayed about 30 minutes. So they should be getting underway any time now. We have coverage, I assume, on 100.7 The Score right now, and so they would be able to give you a more accurate indication of if something is imminent or if it's been delayed again. But yes, it was delayed.
Hopefully they're concluding layup lines now and getting ready to get going.
I can, real quick before we get out of here, another quick check of the scoreboard. UTSA still trailing Tulane 23-10 in the 4th quarter now. UTSA is in the red area and so threatening. The winner of that game will play for a conference championship. Utah State still up on New Mexico, although the Lobos have closed to within 3, 24-21. 2:15 left in the 3rd quarter there. Missouri, as mentioned, just embarrassing. Arkansas 34-0. 7:16 left in the 3rd. A lot of football left there. Boise State still up on Air Force, but the Falcons have closed now. It's a 24-19 ball game at the start of the 4th quarter. That game has Mountain West Conference Championship implications. And earlier in the day, Oklahoma beat TCU 69-45. Iowa handed Nebraska another one-score loss, 13-10. Miami beat Boston College 45-20 to finish their season 7-5. Memphis beat Temple 45-21. Toledo, the class of the MAC, 32-17 over Central Michigan. And then Ohio beat Akron 25-14.
We also had an NFL game today, and it represented an interesting – the Dolphins beat the Jets. No big surprise there. We won't spend a lot of time on that. But, you know, this moment in time, these last 3 hours represented something pretty unique in sports broadcast. I won't say in history like it's never happened before, but there are not many occasions in which college football and NFL are scheduled on the same day, and dang sure not on top of each other. And that's exactly what we had this afternoon. Though it was the Amazon Prime like Thursday night type broadcast was the where it was available. But I mean, this just doesn't happen much, and we're headed for a day, especially as we get into the 12-game playoff, in which not only are there pro and college games on TV at the same time, but pro and college playoff games, and that's going to be epic. I mean,
and don't you know
unheard of
that when this game, because this game has been scheduled for this day on Prime Video for a while, don't you know that when Aaron Rodgers snapped his Achilles, that those Amazon executives were just like, a lot of dirty words, I would guess.
Yeah, you think so? You're among the many, all the TV exec. The TV exec group text, they were all sending cuss words back and forth to each other.
A lot of angry gifs.
This has been the Tech Talk Podcast, presented by Cantex Roofing and Construction. Check out our library of Double T 97.3 podcasts at doublet97.3.com.